Hello. Hi. So good afternoon. Today we're here for the AB 901 regulatory public hearing for public comments. My name is Jane Manti. I am the project or regs coordinator for 901. So when you've been emailing, I'm probably the one who's been responding back to you. So thank you for being here. I'm gonna go ahead and move into our agenda and introductions. You stand easier that way. So here's today's agenda for our hearing. We'll go through introductions and some housekeeping rules. Then we'll go over the regulations themselves shortly, next steps, and then public comment, and then we'll adjourn. Okay. So beside me here, I have two fine people, two guests, who can say who they are.
I'm John Sitz, the manager of the Knowledge Integration Section, which is part of CalRecycle's policy office.
I'm Kate Nita. I'm in the legal office.
And again, my name is Jane Manti. I am a environmental scientist in the KISS office, and John's my boss. So moving in, some just general housekeeping stuff. In the back is a sign-in sheet that please fill out as thoroughly as possible with legible handwriting. There are also some, spare copies of the regulations in case you don't have a copy. They're back there as well. Also, I'll get to that as well, but also, if you look on the screen, you will see a map of the building. In case that there is an emergency of sorts, please, vacate the building and make your way to Chavez Park towards the fountain and stand there. Outside in the corridor, there are bathrooms to the left. And then also, the most important part, submitting comments. So when you come up for oral comments, you will see that on by the microphone, by the dais, there is a bucket. We're asking that you please, if you have it, leave a business card. There is no time limits on the comments, but I'll get to that as well. Okay. Oh, no. There you go. In a moment. Okay. Okay. Thanks. I'll get to comments in a second, but before we get there, I want to talk briefly about the regulations themselves. So the AB 901 regulations, in a nutshell, were passed by the legislature in 2015 to allow the department to streamline how we receive reports on recycling and solid waste disposal. We had three goals in mind. Those goals were to increase our understanding of material flows within the state's recycling infrastructure, improve our operational efficiencies in targeting our state resources to enhance our recycling infrastructure, and then finally to provide the department enforcement authority to ensure that everybody's compliant and timely. So today we'll be talking about that. After public comments, what will happen is that we will review all the comments and provide commentary or responses to those that are relevant. If any changes are made to the regulations, you will have time to provide additional feedback to our changes. If not, we'll move forward in the process. At that point, we'll finalize the file and submit these regs to OAL, the Office of Administrative Law. And that will conclude our making process. So to submit comment today, there are two ways. They can be written or oral. For written comment, we're asking that you either mail, email, or fax it to the addresses you see on the screen. We highly recommend that if you submit oral comment, that you also do written as well. And note that it's due by tonight at 11:59 on the dot p.m. If submitting an oral comment, we ask that you come to the front, to the dais, and say who you are and who you represent. Again, there's a bucket on the dais you see by the microphone. If you have a business card, please leave that card in the bucket. It'll help us identify who you are when making our response to you. When making comments, we ask that you be as specific as possible in regards to the section or subsection that you are referring to, exactly what the issue you feel may be, and also a idea for how we can remedy that, your recommendation or suggestion to fix it. Okay. We'll close the commentary period once everyone gives their comments. All right. John. So to help in making public comments, you'll see on the screen that we have a very quaint index here that will tell you the names, titles of each of the sections. So if you get lost in the regs, please refer back to that. It might help. Again, if you're watching currently online, you can submit your comments to ab901.reporting@calrecycle.ca.gov. Again, that's ab901.reporting@calrecycle.ca.gov. Yes. If you submit those comments online, we will read them here in the hearing, so they're on record. Okay. All right, with that, we'll begin. Any comments, just please come to the front.
Business card. Good afternoon. Is that on? Is it on? Do I need to do something? There we go. Is it on? Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Kathy Lynch, and I represent the California Refuse Recycling Council, CRRC, representing recycling and refuse companies managing waste through composting, anaerobic digestion, renewable energy production. We would refer you to our numerous filings on this matter throughout this process, and most recently yesterday, March 13th, filing on this matter. I just really want to emphasize a couple of overarching issues that are extremely important to our members to assist in proper implementation and success of this regulation. First, we have consistently raised the question about outreach and identifying the potential reporting entities before these regulations are finalized. We believe that CalRecycle needs to establish a clear flow chart of how reporting and tracking will take place among reporting entities with examples of reporting entities and how that flow works. So we would hope to see a flow chart ahead of the regulations that's user-friendly and really outlines the various reporting entities. We believe this must be done before final rulemaking is completed, as it will potentially assist with the regulatory language, decrease confusion and training on the back end, and enable more accurate and consistent reporting, as well as increase compliance. Second, we believe that since this regulatory package migrates regulatory entities to a new system of reporting, that the reporting format must be distributed and reviewed before the conclusion of the regulations. Reporting entities would appreciate the opportunity to review the format, test it out, and offer suggestions. Based on prior experience with other regulatory reporting formats, this has great impact and potentially economic impact to our members in terms of staff time, training needs. And in fact, this leads me to my third point, which is we would like to see the methodology you use to determine the cost estimates per facility. I think you have a cost estimate of $2,150. We're not sure how you reach this calculation. We're certainly struggling to come up with a calculation, and it depends a great deal on how much outreach is done and how much our customers and reporting entities are aware of this obligation under the new regulations. Our members across the board believe that the number will be significantly higher and hard to determine based on the current construct. We conservatively estimate that this will cost over $60,000, 1.5 PYs, and actually increase for facilities that have multiple layers of reporting with the activities that they do on site. The on-site reporting is very complicated in our view and needs to be streamlined. We note in other comments filed earlier by other stakeholders similar concerns around costs and other cost variables that we didn't even acknowledge in our cost estimate. In closing, we really appreciate the professional work of CalRecycle and the outreach they have done to us, the opportunities we've had to meet informally and formally with you to work through some of these issues, and we are committed to a successful outcome for this. But we would greatly appreciate the consideration of what I have raised here. While they're overarching issues, these are very practical in nature and very important to have regulatory success. While this might delay a little bit the full bore head on the regulations, we feel that we just really must see a flow chart so that all these reporting entities know ahead of time. We've gone back and forth on this, and I can tell you for a fact that a lot of people out there still do not realize they're impacted by 901. So thank you very much for your time. And again, we did file comments yesterday. Thank you.
And thank you for participating in this process with us and working back and forth. Regs are always kind of an iterative thing, and we're aware and working on some of these issues, so thank you.
Adam Harper with the California Construction and Industrial Materials Association. I want to thank CalRecycle staff for all of the time they committed during this process, which has been multiple years. Really, I'm here when we submitted comments yesterday, which hopefully you received, with a lot of clarifying questions of things that as you look towards finalizing, we were going, okay, we had these conversations, but we don't necessarily see all of this fully clarified. The first thing we called out, and I don't want to go through the whole letter, but in the record retention requirements for the reporting entities, there was significant changes that were made both to reporting for recycling entities, which are largely where our members will fall, just relative C&D recycling, and their kind of reporting obligations. And when you look in the record keeping retention, it seems to be, it's kind of like a disposal facility list of everything you're going to keep. And so we would suggest clarity language in there that you're only required to keep records relevant to your reporting obligations. And we gave an example of that, but we really think it's necessary to ensure that recycling operations aren't found out of compliance in the future. Another activity in the generator discussion one, we appreciate that generators were defined as not in the regulation. And to give you an example, let's say a ready-mix concrete facility that may not be a recycler will dispatch ready-mix concrete trucks with ready-mix concrete. They will get to the job site. The concrete won't be delivered because it exceeded temperatures, tolerances, or whatever. It'll have to come back to the site. And then they have to handle that material as a generator would. Clearly not a recycling activity in our mind. And those types of clarity issues are ones we want to get clarified in something like a fact document or something for reporters to really help people navigate. Yes, this kind of looks like reporting, like recycling, because we might actually be using that material for fill somewhere, but it was a generator activity versus recycling. We weren't taking in third-party goods, so to speak. We actually felt that got blurred for our members because of the definition you use where you talk about all of the material that is generated at a single facility, and our facilities are delivering material that sometimes doesn't properly place that we then are responsible for removing or bringing back. So we called that out for resolution and suggested some ideas on that. In the recycling facility or operation, early on we had a lot of discussions about inert debris engineered fill operations that occur at mining sites. And they're essentially taking in pre-separated C&D waste that then gets placed in an engineered fill capacity to backfill the mine pits. Staff at that time had indicated they would be falling under the recycling portion of the reporting, kind of reporting on the quarterly basis. Didn't see a corresponding change in the definition to reflect that. We thought that would be very beneficial for those types of operations for reporting clarity. Another issue that is a part of the new industry being regulated, and people wanted us to raise this again. These are facilities that really haven't been in a vigorous reporting system to you. They were really hoping still to have an annual reporting obligation. These are, seasonal work, so often in the winter months, kind of the winter session, you're very likely you may not get a report. But if this rule could be modified so there was an annual reporting option for people in the recycling category, that would be extremely beneficial. Finally, we'll just stand here and say we'd be happy to work with your staff on a fact document question and answer towards implementation, because we're already getting all of the questions like, where would I report? Am I in? How am I in? And there's going to be a lot of people that are going through that. I even got one. Are we reporting on the November 1 to December quarter, or on the first quarter of 2018 type questions, right? Because that's not exactly clear. But want to thank you for all your time as you move towards finalizing these rules, and hopefully you will be able to assist us with some additional clarity. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chuck Helgett with Republic Services, and I'll be very brief because I think you're probably going to put me down to 1 minute, John, typically. This regulatory process has been a lengthy one. I think I had long hair and a mustache like you when we first started. And I want to thank you for the iterative process that you've employed in getting through these regulations, because there were a lot of sticky issues, and many of them have been resolved. Particularly compliment you on the work that was done on the confidentiality side of that, because that was not easy. And thank Elliot, too. I think he's in the back of the room. I'm going to, again, be very brief and just simply say I want to add my support to the CRC letter that was submitted, and fully endorse the comments made by Kathy Lynch. I want to put an exclamation point around the request of sitting down and working out. I know you'll obviously do a guidance because these are complex regulations, and would be more than happy to offer support in trying to help put that together. But the chart that Kathy was talking about, something that's easily understood by the facilities, would be very much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. And yeah, we identified a few places that certainly need some clarification, and we're really aware that outreach and education and clarifying where everybody sits in this system is very important.
Hi, Pat Shivo, representing CR&R Environmental Services. Start out by saying I also had long hair and a mustache in the first set of DRS regs. John remembers well. Just a couple of comments. I want to mirror Kathy's comments regarding having some more transparency regarding the cost of the system. CR&R services 50 cities, thousands of businesses, multiple MRFs, compost facilities. And it's going to be a pretty complex undertaking, and so I think that needs to be revisited. We'd be glad to help if you would like. In addition, we would like to see a flow chart like Kathy mentioned. That would really help. We represent just a minute number of people involved in these regulations, and there's so many people out there that are just oblivious to what's going on right now. You can tell them, we try on the ground to try to convey to them what's going on. I know you guys, it's frustrating, but a flow chart would really help, and it would help up front in the training processes. That would help us conserve a lot of resources in setting up the systems. Having a mock-up of the database would help as well, so that we can get our IT people started in conceptualizing what they're going to have to do, so that we can get things done in a timely manner. So, we want to report things, we want to do it on time, we want to do it accurately, but we do need some of those tools so that we can make it work for you. So, thank you.
Thank you for your comment.
Kim Scheibly, Marin Sanitary Service. I want to thank CalRecycle staff and others for really trying to make this process work. As someone whose job it is to report, I really greatly appreciate the desire to streamline a process. Having said that, I'd like to expand upon a few things that Kathy Lynch and others have brought up. Our company is actually a group of companies that all interact together. And so I did submit comments, but I would like to expand upon some of the things that I submitted with some real examples. First, I'm going to start with cost. So there's been several laws passed on recycling and organics waste diversion in the last several years. Because of that need, or those mandates, and because of the increased reporting required of the cities and towns that we serve, and with our permits, we've actually hired 2 full-time staff to work on just that. Myself, and as the Director of Compliance and Customer Relations, and we have a Director of Financial Reporting. So the tonnage piece with everything else. with this law, we still don't have enough staff to be able to do that. And so I appreciate the number that CRRC has come up with, but I'm from Marin County, and I can't hire a staff member who has the skills with Excel and database management to actually be able to work for even that cost. So this is going to be a big cost to actually manage and implement all of this data that I think is very important to start tracking. I wanted to give a specific example to 18815.3, registration, reporting, and exemptions. Our company has a MRF and a transfer station with a full solid waste facilities permit, a recycling and buyback operation, a household hazardous waste facility, and we are a franchise contract hauler. So we pretty much have, we have to get numbers for all of these different entities. We often move materials between entities for one, efficiency and cost savings. So as an example, we would move materials from that come in to our resource recovery facility, our fully permitted MRF. We might end up with bottles and cans that we would then take to our recycling center to be sorted, baled, and sold. It might happen in the reverse, where scrap metals are dropped at our buyback center, and then we send those materials to our resource recovery facility, our MRF, to be baled with things like, you know, scrap metal from large appliances or whatever else we've pulled out of our C&D loads. And that would be sold and tracked and baled. And right now, the way the regs read, those examples alone would be really onerous. So I thought I will actually put these again in written format to expand upon what I said about a week ago. So thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments and your examples.
Hi there. My name is Veronica Pardo. I too am with the California Refuse Recycling Council with my colleague Kathy Lynch. So a few items I want to go through. We did submit yesterday a very detailed letter, and I'd like to thank CalRecycle staff for all the informal regulatory process we've been through. We've seen a lot of fixes in the regulations, but there are still some very strong outlying issues that need to be addressed. I think this has been spoken to about today, but we really need to see a who's in and who's out. We've been saying this pretty much from the beginning, a list of the industry that is expected to report with some more details, you know, auto shredders, plastic recyclers, concrete recyclers. We'd like to really see this list spelled out so that folks that are managing certain material types understand that they're obligated to report. That folds into my second point, that we really would like to hear better how reporting entities will be brought into the system. You know, and this really kind of ties into the database reporting. You know, if you can't find that RDRS number, and what is this really going to look like, especially in terms of your brokers or other non-reporting entities? And to that point, we'd like that database format, you know, ahead of time, and the opportunity to beta test that and kind of delay enforcement on reporting for that opportunity, because we just feel like there's going to be a lot of issues initially with the reporting, and we really want to get that right, and we want to get that database format correct. And then to expand a little bit on Kim's comments, this notion of moving material on site, on the same site, and we address this in more detail and give you some suggestions on possible methodology that is outside of having to weigh and material categorize that particular material that is moved on an on-site facility, what we're kind of calling incidental sorting. So if a MRF receives waste, an inbound waste ton, and then they maybe pull out some recyclable material from that load and then send it to their on-site recycling or composting facility. You know, it might be green waste, it might be a recyclable material. You know, this material is just kind of being transferred on-site, and it's being captured on the back end of the recycler and composting facility. And many of these facilities, most of these facilities, are not going back, weighing the material, categorizing it by material type when they're sending it to themselves. And there isn't a clear methodology in your regulations for this type of material movement, and we feel very strongly that this should be included and would reduce costs for these particular facilities. And I guess the section would be 18815.9 G2 under reasonable methods. But again, it's detailed in our written comments, and I thank you for this time.
One of the things that would help, I think, is if there is a list of people who you think we should include on that list to say if they're in or out, it would be really helpful if you submit those, and you can do that after the comment period, because this is kind of a back and forth. Help us. Because when we go through, we've had a few questions that were super convoluted, and it's kind of hard to say, if a person's doing 6 different things, well, they're out. You don't have to report these, but you do have to report these. But having that list of different types of activities and businesses so that it's relatable. Because we can say, well, if you're a recycler and a recycler does this, and some people will read that and say, well, that's me. And some people will read that and say, well, that's not me. And they're doing the same business. So getting that list would be really helpful. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. Good afternoon, Nick Lapis, California Advanced Waste. I wanted to touch on an issue that we've been discussing since the first draft of the regs, probably since the first workshop, and that's the direct land application issue. We've gone back and forth with you guys in terms of, do the current regs give you sufficient power to proactively enforce potential violations of both your state minimum standards through LEAs, but also potentially county ag commissioners to enforce quarantines, regional water boards, and the air districts. In one of our last conversations, I think it was kind of left at, we think the proposal as written covers everything, and we have the authority, and we don't really need to make any changes. If that is the case, I would appreciate if you put that in writing in terms of, this is our mechanism for doing proactive enforcement when we're being told that direct land application of material is happening, and we suspect that we have reason to believe that it's leaving a quarantine zone, or it's material that needs to be pathogen reduced that is not being pathogen reduced, et cetera. Just because at this point, even I'm confused in terms of what our latest conversation is on this issue. And when we get into he said, she said in 5 years, it's going to be even worse. So, and then a second issue that I have not raised before, but in the past week, I've had 4 or 5 progressive local governments approach me saying that they're worried that the regs as written would limit how much information they get about material leaving their jurisdictions. I am not sure that they are right, that it would in any way limit that information, but I guess I have a question about whether or not you are in communication with those folks, and if not, I'd like to facilitate a meeting with at least those 4 or 5 local governments that have reached out to me.
We'll probably take you up on that. We have gotten some comment letters from local governments who are concerned about what data they will or won't get, and they want us to clarify that. And they'll be getting fully what they get in disposal reporting and more. But the 901 was very specific about, on the recycling side, that jurisdictions could request company-wide data, but not, and we're not tracking jurisdiction by jurisdiction data. So we're constrained by the statute somewhat on that. But if people have concerns that are in relation to the DRS data or other things, we'll attempt to assure them that, yes, you'll be getting more accurate, hopefully, more timely, and clear data on the disposal side.
And I know you have several provisions in there saying that nothing in this reg is prohibiting them from using their existing authority. I assume that also applies on the recycling side. So maybe just having that conversation offline, clarifying what you're doing in this reg, what they are prohibited from doing, what they're not prohibited, et cetera. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name's Graham Noyes. I'm an attorney in town in this representing Fulcrum Bioenergy. And Fulcrum's coming at this from sort of a different perspective, but I think an important perspective to the regulations. These are supplemental to the written comments that I filed by email today. And just to provide some more explanation in terms of our perspective, we want to start also by voicing our appreciation of the engagement. Obviously, we're at the 5th round of proposed regulations, which suggests a lot of work went into them. And our particular issue from Fulcrum's perspective, they are a company that takes post-separated municipal solid waste and produces that and processes that into transportation fuels. The process they use would typically be called gasification, but does not meet California's statutory gasification definition, which, as far as I know, no actual plant meets anywhere. But essentially, they have a number of steps in their process that are impacted by these regulations. They're in a unique place. And so we had significant engagement to understand how they fit in particular, whether the material that ultimately went to fuel production would be qualifying as diversion. That's very significant on sort of the California side and the waste disposal and waste management communities, looking at outlets to find diversion credits essentially for both solid waste material and organic waste material. And it's very impactful just from a business standpoint for Fulcrum as to whether they qualify as material that's diverted or non-diverted in terms of how much material is going to be available to them and what the economics of that are going to be. With these proposed regulations, we are in full support. We think their position has been clarified. Not that it's simple to navigate through all the different regulations that exist in the statutes and regulations, but we think that has been done in the correct way and in such a way that it facilitates the crediting for the material that either is sent to conventional recycling by Fulcrum or is processed to a point where it can then be produced into a fuel. And my written comments walk through sort of how we understand that process to work for really their 2 facilities. Their first facility is what they call a feedstock processing facility. Most would probably call that a MRF. It's located in the Lockwood facility in the Reno area, essentially inside that facility. And at this point already, some of the loads that would otherwise be going to landfill are being diverted over to the feedstock processing facility. They're being dumped into a massive warehouse. I've been to the site, and we've taken some of the Air Resources Board up to the site and extended invitations to CalRecycle for another site visit. So I continue to extend that invitation. Essentially a massive warehouse where there are large-scale movement devices pushing material onto conveyor belts to go through all manner of sorting and separating. They're recovering about 10% more recyclables from the post-separated waste through those processes. And then they're also separating out about 35% additional material that is inerts that then goes to landfill, and obviously that component recognized that's going to disposal. The remaining material is ultimately going to be then moved to another facility that Fulcrum is planning to build and has the financing for, that will be taking that and producing transportation fuels, including diesel fuel, jet fuel, and biocrude. And so in our review, it looks like both of those facilities end up being processing facilities and will have reporting obligations. So just wanted to lay out sort of where Fulcrum stands in the regulations, tried to do that in the letter, and very available for additional conversations, and want to emphasize that what this agency is doing and how these regulations are done is very important to facilitating both this industry in terms of these Fulcrum's process has been assessed under the low carbon fuel standard. and has been found to have a carbon intensity level of 15, which is essentially an 85% reduction when compared to a conventional diesel fuel out there. So from a greenhouse gas perspective, it's a tremendous benefit, and having the diversion side of this really further enables that. These are expensive facilities to develop, so having regulatory certainty and support is very important, and really appreciate all the work on this.
Well, I've got two comments, and then Jane and Kate can correct me. So the first one is, we're doing these reporting regulations. We're not really delving into the definitions of what's disposal and what's diversion or recycling. And so we will rely on the other statutes that delineate that more. And if those change, then reporting will change accordingly. The other thing is, as much as I'd like to extend AB 901 reporting nationwide, it really ends at the border of California. So if whoever is exporting material to Lockwood, which is Nevada, right, would report under AB 901, but those facilities wouldn't be required to report because they're outside of our jurisdiction.
Well, thanks for that, and I think probably the best way to engage on that is to refer to the specifics of the letter. We would assume that would be voluntary reporting, but given that it's essentially a two-facility situation where the materials are being sorted at that first facility, we're capturing about 10% just conventional recyclables. That's relatively straightforward. But they've got about 55% of the original California, and we're only talking about the California material, ignore everything else. The California material that's ultimately going to fuel production, we're assuming we need essentially a paper trail all the way to support that, and so we pay a lot of attention to how the end product and the end user definitions were established there. And we think, because of this process, there are some things that are appropriately resolved by regulations that haven't really been resolved by statute, not to change what's out there in statute. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mm-hmm.
Good afternoon. Noelle Kramers with the California Farm Bureau Federation. We were made aware of the potential impact of these regulations on some of our members fairly late in the process of development of the regulations. So we have not been participating in some of the discussion on the earlier versions. But I just wanted to explain our concern over the impacts that this would have. So California is the #1 agricultural producing state in the nation. We have a significant amount of livestock raised in California, as well as a significant amount of agricultural products. Those livestock consume quite a bit of the byproducts from our farmed products. So for instance, grape pumice, tomato pumice, cotton seeds, distillers grains, almond hulls, bakery products, citrus pulp. And that's just a handful. If you think about all of the different food processing that happens and all of the different crops that are raised in California. So it appears under these regulations that when people are purchasing these byproducts, because they're categorized as organics, that then those haulers transporting those products would be subject to the reporting requirements. So if that's not the case, I'm very pleased that would not be the case, because this would have a significant impact. While many of these products do have nutritional value, some of them are hard to handle. So tomato pumice, for instance, is a very wet product, and so a dairy using tomato pumice would have to have sort of special equipment and special storage for that. So if there are additional costs then placed on those haulers, which would be passed on to that dairy purchasing that product, they may choose to use virgin material instead, which then defeats the purpose of kind of California's overarching goal, which is to reduce or to divert the product away from landfills. So I would agree with Ms. Lynch's comment and request to have a flow chart explaining who's subject to this, how will this work. That would be very helpful. I would want to echo Mr. Harper's comment on the point that there should be annual reporting instead of quarterly reporting, particularly in the agricultural arena where you may only be hauling products during that season. So the tomato pumice, again, during the tomato harvest season, that would be in one quarter. If haulers are subject to this, we wouldn't want them to have to be reporting the other 3 quarters. So those are my comments. We'll be submitting additional comments, but I'd be happy to have conversations offline further on this. Thanks.
Can I ask a question to clarify something? So in these, a transaction where you might have tomato pumice going to a feedlot, is the person who generates the tomato pumice the one sending that material, or the, they make the transaction with the farm or the feedlot?
So they may make it directly with the farm, or there may be a feed broker in between.
Okay. And so would you say if it's just a hauler, they shouldn't be reporting, or even if it's a broker type situation, those people should be excluded as well?
I think both situations would have equal impacts to the use of those products. So,
okay. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Laura Ferrante with Recology. We submitted pretty extensive comments earlier this morning, so I will be brief and just touch on our major points. First off, we think there are some issues with consistency among some of the definitions, the way they are defined and then used throughout the draft regulations, and also with the Public Resources Code. The draft regulations repeatedly reference, quote, solid waste, organics, and recyclable material, and we find the reference to these different categories of waste, again, to be inconsistent with the PRC, which uses solid waste as a blanket term that includes virtually all non-hazardous discarded material, including organic waste and discarded recyclables. Additionally, the term organics as defined is a little strange to us, as it includes both material feedstock as well as end products, but seems to be used primarily throughout the draft regulations to discuss feedstock material. Secondly, one of the issues that has been discussed by several people today is the reporting requirements for integrated companies and how excessive that may be to be reporting on the same material within the same entity at several different stops along the way. Somewhat related is Section 18815.5A1 and the reference to reporting on inbound material at transfer processing facilities. We read this to exceed the authority of AB 901. We thought it was only that facilities, transfer stations, and MRFs, et cetera, would only be reporting on outbound material, not inbound material. And again, at those facilities, to reporting both inbound and outbound seems excessive to us. Another issue, maintaining confidentiality of customer information. Chuck mentioned this earlier, and there was a lot of work done already during the informal process. However, there were a couple of sections we found that may violate this. We believe that reporting entities should only be required to provide identifying contact information for other reporting entities, not for out-of-state customers, not for other customers or end users, or there was one section that said in the event it's unknown whether the receiving entity is a reporting entity or an end user, then report the contact information, and we disagree with that. And finally, there are some liability provisions that we've mentioned at every step in this process that don't seem to have been addressed at this point. We think it is unreasonable to hold a reporting entity responsible for the actions, inactions, and/or non-compliance of another reporting entity. So again, thank you very much for the process thus far. It's been very extensive, and we've appreciated the back and forth and the opportunity to submit comments. So thank you.
And I have a clarifying question for you as well, please. So when you're talking about the integrated companies, are you talking about a site that moves material around on-site, or are you talking about material that flows from one site to another, or both?
Both.
Okay. And I'm really looking forward to seeing if you have suggested language on the liability issue, because I thought that we had addressed that one. So if it's still not clear, I
Submitted
appreciate it.
a letter as well as a redlined copy
Great.
of the regulations with our comments.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Hi, I'm Randy Wittig from LKQ. And again, thank you, your staff, for talking to June Mendez and the folks from LKQ. I really appreciate it. Some of the concerns we have on the reporting is, in the dismantling, auto dismantling is what we do. I've been in this business since 1981. Prior to LKQ, they bought my business, so I've been around a long time. Our fear is, number one, we don't really send anything to waste. Our cars are dismantled. We sell the parts. We recycle the fluids. Where we got a lot of reporting that we already do with the DMV, with all the other things that we recycle, with the oil and the fuel and the gas and all that. I'm not sure how it would be beneficial for us to have to report this when we take the entire body to the shredder. That is when the car is completely shredded and there's nothing left of it. I don't know what happens to that business. I'm not involved with that. But for recycling with a permitted auto dismantler in California, they got some pretty onerous regulations already, and we're not sending almost anything to the waste landfill. Our parts are either resold or we send the Hulk to the shredder. That's kind of how it works. We did send you a letter, and it specifically states the things that we would like to be changed in this, the wording of it, and it's linked back to the definition of auto recycler in the DMV code book. One of the other things is the reporting part of this, as far as this is a really competitive business. If we report how much tonnage that we've sent out to somebody, they will know exactly what that facility does in volume. It's a pretty simple mathematical equation, and we really don't want to report it at all, because number one, we're not the one that's sending anything to the landfills whatsoever. Is there anything else I got? Again, it's just really, we don't want any more regulation on something that's incredibly regulated with such a low margin on it. That was my comments. If you have any questions, my card's in there, and I appreciate you talking to the folks at LKQ. Thank you.
And we did try and clarify that in section .3A4 when we talk about businesses that do resale for reuse. And one of the things that we mention the things we mention are thrift store, auto dismantler, building supply reclaimer, or reuser, or any other person whose primary business is resale for reuse. And that's under the exclusions of who doesn't have to report.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, the way I thought this was is if, man, maybe I'm wrong, but the way I understood this is if you have a primary business and more of the vehicle is scrapped than parts sold to the customers, then you have to report. Am I wrong on that?
Well, it has two criteria. One is if you're making more money off of the resale for reuse, mm-hmm. or if you have more tonnage from resale for reuse, then you're excluded. If you're making more money from the scrap side and you're having more tonnage from the scrap side, then you might be more on the scrap recycler side of this. But if that's not a reasonable breakdown, we're open to hearing suggestions for that.
The way we look at it is, we have two different type of facilities. We have full service, where when we buy a car, that car is vaporized. It truly is. We sell everything off of it. We also have self-service facilities that buy the older end-of-life type vehicles. Some of them vehicles are, dismantled to the ground. Other ones are not. If you took as a percentage, I honestly don't know what it would be, but I would think that it would err on the side of more scrap, as in metal that's going to be recycled at the shredder. We don't shred the cars. All of our cars go to a shredder. That's where we think that the reporting should be. Because that car goes whole to them, right? It might be flat, but we haven't taken apart the part that's going to have anything in it that's going to have any fluff in the car.
And that's why we included both of those criteria. So it's not just tonnage, it's either value or tonnage. So
Okay.
if the value of the stuff reclaimed for resale is higher than the value of the scrap that's left over, then you're out.
Right?
If the tonnage from resale is higher than the scrap, which in this case it sounds like it probably isn't,
Right.
then you wouldn't be out. But you have, if you meet either of those criteria, you're out. So if the value exceeds the resale value stuff exceeds the scrap value, then you'd be out. But like I say, we can talk about and look at different criteria or how to tweak those criteria.
I appreciate it. And my card's in there. You got my contact information. I appreciate that.
And real quick as well, to add to your other comment about confidentiality,
Yes.
if you do report,
Yes.
and if you were doing so as a recycler, we actually would not know the business's contact information, where it went, just in general, like the category as well as the region it went to.
The way we look at it is, again, we don't care about that. What we're looking at is if I report that we produce X amount of tons from this facility, we got 55 facilities in California, if we have this much tonnage in there, I will know exactly what your retail sales are in about 2 seconds. Our competitors, then they would focus on trying to buy more cars in that market. It's a tough market with really skinny margins. That's it. I mean, that's very general information, but it means a lot to people like us. We know what to do with it. Our competitors are very versed in this too.
And on the recycling side, the AB 901 included provisions about not releasing confidential data. So proprietary type data, we wouldn't release company by company information ever. We might sum it up at a regional level or something, but we wouldn't, even just a tonnage number for a facility on the recycling side, we're not going to release.
Okay. Again, we're really focused on it being reported once, so there's not duplicity in this, and that would be the shredder, not us. So if you have any questions, please feel free. My email's on the sign-in too. I can answer questions. I've been around a long time. I already have gray hair. I'm old. Thank you.
Thank you for your response, for your comment. Anybody else? I'll check. Steve, any comments in the inbox? True. If you're watching online, you can email us at ab901.reporting@calrecycle.ca.gov. Again, that is ab901reporting@calrecycle.ca.gov. We'll wait a while.
Neil Egger with California Compost Coalition. I wanted to reiterate Nick Lappis's comments about land application and the ability to track those materials. I think once reporting starts, we'll see that tens of thousands of tons a day are disappearing out into land application sites, a lot of it not legal. The city of Los Angeles collects 1,600 tons a day of green waste. 80% of it goes to their contractors, and they don't know where it goes after that. But it's going out to land application largely across the Southern California landscape, and it'd be helpful to know where it's going. Feedstock supply is going to be critical to helping to develop the organics recycling infrastructure that we need desperately. We're still figuring out how to pay for it, but understanding it is going to be a key element to that. And the Farm Bureau brings up a very good point about food processing materials. So bakery waste, for instance, clarifying that would be helpful. So if a bakery has materials that they're able to find a home for as a donation and divert that from wasting it at all is great. If it's going to animal feed, that's a different market. But if that material is going to a digester or another type of waste processing facility. I'm not sure why there would be different reporting requirements for those 3 different scenarios. So trying to clarify the boundaries around what types of food processing materials and other organics will be helpful, and again, understanding the total realm of food materials and organics that we're going to need to process. Thanks.
Thank you for your comment. Anybody else?
We did receive a couple online questions that are kind of written comments that came in during this. Do you want me to read the whole thing, or?
How long are we talking?
There's ones that have several pages long with going section by section. And then there's a short kind of question from Deidre that, that's a little bit more condensed that I think would be good. The other ones, we've received them as written comments, so I don't know if they need to be read verbatim into the record, but
Yeah.
I'll go ahead with the one from Deidre Dingman.
Please.
Conservation Programs Manager, Contra Costa County. She says, consistent with the existing DRS regs, section 18815.1 scope and purpose needs to also include references to PRC sections 41821.2 and 41821.3, both of which refer to the disposal tracking system, because without doing so, these rigs conflict with intent of AB 901, which states that the new regulations should not reduce or eliminate existing data reporting / access authority granted to CalRecycle or local jurisdiction. Then she says section 18815.2A43 needs to include districts among the recognized reporting entities to avoid conflicting with PRC 41821.2B2 and 41821.2C. And then her last comment is that the proposed regs do not include any provisions providing the authority and/or imposing requirements noted below. In order to avoid having these regs conflict with or in effect invalidate / make inoperable the existing provisions in PRC 41821.2 or 41821.3, the regs need to include additional provisions requiring that reported disposal quantities separately list disposed inert waste as defined in PRC 41821.3A1 for inclusion in reports available to jurisdictions so they can generate annual reports that comply with that with C2. And she also says reported quantities disposed or diverted separately list amounts disposed or diverted by a quote-unquote district as defined in PRC 41821.2A in reports available to jurisdictions in conformance with 41821.2B2 and 41821.2C for use by jurisdictions in determining districts' proportional responsibility pursuant to 41821.2D.
And we'll take a look at that. And if there is anybody online who has comments or submitted written comments, but they wanted to have us highlight something, you're welcome to do that in the next couple minutes. If there aren't any more comments in the room, we're getting ready to wrap it up here. So anyone else, come on up.
Yeah, we had a procedural question come in from Carlos Slythe, Associate Civil Engineer, LA County Public Works. He just asks, will a recording of the webinar be available afterwards? And the answer to that question is yes. It will be on the website.
Well, all right. I guess that is it. If you're watching at your office or at home or you're here, want to thank you for being with us today and for submitting your comments, whether in writing, email, fax, or here as well. So as we adjourn, I want to point out that please, if you're not already on our listserv, please join the listserv. That way you can stay up to date. If you have clients, encourage them as well to join the listserv, to also be within the loop. They can do so by going to our website. There is a listserv page and just picking the AB 901 listserv. Also, any comments, questions, concerns, suggestions, recommendations, examples, please send them via email to us, again, at our AB901 email address. That is ab901.reporting@calrecycle.ca.gov. Thank you again for your time.